when you had someone like Donald Trump as president, the economy was at one point the best that it had ever been. My background sort of started actually seeing Donald Trump announce his presidency back in 2015. I was like just about to finish off 5th grade. I plan on 100% voting for Donald Trump this November.
I am a leftist. I likely will not be voting for Joe Biden in November. I think that he's alienated me. I do plan, I think, to vote for either Cornel West or Claudia de la Cruz and Karina Garcia.
When you had someone like Donald Trump as president, the economy was at one point the best that it had ever been. Second Biden came in, we saw inflation just skyrocket immediately, like a bunch of unuseful spending.
I think that Biden's handling of the economy has in many ways somehow been better than I would expect, but also still bad. Biden's immediate response to COVID was the American Rescue Plan, the bipartisan infrastructure law, and the Inflation Reduction Act. I think those three key pieces of legislation helped to kind of almost save the US from like a technical recession, so to speak.
I personally think Biden's handling of the economy has been rather poor. You know, there are companies at this point that I think are screwing the average American over. I definitely think that's true.
I think that the stimulus checks are like a really good way to allow Americans to have disposable income. Of course, at the same time, we've seen price increases, we've seen inflation, and those things have to be recognized as problems for the average American.
I'm concerned, definitely, for what the future may look like if Biden gets reelected, especially after graduating college.
Why is Trump such a powerful figure on the right? There are things that working class and white voters feel like they saw Trump address. That doesn't mean that Trump himself is the right figure for addressing those issues. I do think that, again, fundamentally the issue is that Republicans and Democrats are essentially a uniparty in many ways when it comes to protecting the interests of the owning class. But I mean, that doesn't mean that we should be going in a more conservative direction, you know what I mean?
I think it's funny is that you and I both agree that there's a uniparty. I completely think that too.
Trump, I think, hasn't shown an interest in ensuring that unions are not only protected but also improved.
I do think that's actually very false. I think actually this year, more than any years that Trump has ran, unions are more open to supporting him than ever.
I don't really know, because I feel like Republican policy and conservative policy doesn't really focus on unions as an actual thing that we should move toward. And I think that's part of why we see the current inflation and price increases was because what Trump's tax cuts, I think, allowed companies to do is basically get away with these exorbitant price increases.
I think under Donald Trump, we saw a very prosperous economy. I think if it's been proven to work before, why not do it again when literally the policies that are happening right now are proven to fail us?
I think that David had a few thought-provoking points around the labor movement for the Republican Party, and I do think that it kind of comes from a little bit of a misunderstanding of how working class movements have typically operated throughout American history. I think I was able to share some of my perspective regarding the Biden administration, as well as reasons why young voters are feeling so alienated at this moment.
No, I didn't realize that when I was coming in today that he'd be saying he wasn't going to be voting for Joe Biden.
I think that one of the things that we agreed on the most was that a lot of the Democratic Party policies are not successful for the United States at this time. I thought we had a really good conversation.
I still have the same views that I did coming in here.